Welcome to What Happened on Saturday with Marlon Kerner. Marlon, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you? Your Irish
Very
had a break, so you're feeling
yes.
pretty good.
I had a break from the Irish too, which I kind of needed after that 4-week gauntlet. We are going to get into everything Ohio State, Penn State. I'm going to give you the floor in a couple minutes. I thought maybe we could start with just a quick rundown of some of the other games that happened this weekend and the major storylines. Then we're going to dive deep into your impressions of the Ohio State Penn State game. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some frustrations and maybe some questions and thoughts that I have about a couple different topics that, I'm really interested in your perspective as a former player. So just kind of
Sure.
looking at the new AP Top 25, couple notable things down near the bottom. James Madison is now 25th at 7-0, which always kind of, just it's a name that you don't see up on the list too much. Our friends at USC are down at 24 after taking another
Yeah,
heartbreaker.
yeah,
We talked about that Utah game last week. Man, Utah, I love watching Utah. Backup quarterback, tough team, disciplined, everything that USC isn't. And now,
right.
quick question for you: if you're Caleb Williams, do you play the rest of the year?
Yeah, you have to play the rest of the year. You have to kind of show that these last two games they can't define all the work you've done, all the career you've already built. Like reigning Heisman Trophy winner coming in and just didn't play well enough in those games to get his team or propel his team to the victory. So I know people like, hey, sit down, stay out of it, don't do this, don't do that, don't risk the injury. More than likely, he has an insurance policy against that, or else you wouldn't even worry about this season. You would have sat out before. So I think he still has some things to prove. He's still got a few games left to go against some quality opponents. The question you ask is then once you get to a bowl game, do you decide to play in that? And I think for that response, no, you don't play in the bowl game, but you can't just leave your team high and
Agreed.
dry for the rest of the season. You have to finish out what you started. It didn't go the way you thought you were going to go. You lost two games. And so that's the way it goes sometimes. Like there's no guarantee of victory when you step out on the field. It's what happens on any given Saturday, as I like to borrow from any given Sunday. But any given Saturday, any team could get beat, and they've gotten beaten by two. I mean, Notre Dame put it on them, and then you come back and you play Utah, and Utah played a physical game and beat them at their own game. So yeah, you can't get mad and say I'm a pout and not play because I'm worried about my NFL career. It's not a bowl game. You go finish out what you started with your brothers in the summertime. So no, he should definitely not sit out for the rest of the season.
A real rough look from them too. Lincoln Riley after the game made none of the players available for the media, which kind of fits his profile of being a bit of a front runner of a coach. Not really all that likable in the Brian Kelly mold of leaving one program kind of high and dry in Oklahoma.
Right.
And I wasn't really impressed that after a tough loss like that, you don't make your guys available to the media because they need practice with the media. That might help some of those guys get drafted, or the teams will be able to see how they handle a tough loss. The NFL teams, I just think you're doing your team a disservice and your players a disservice by not making them available to the media after admittedly a tough loss. But I mean, come on, USC, be better.
Yeah, definitely.
You got your
Definitely.
ass handed to you 2 weeks in a row. All right, sorry. Just come out, talk to the media, and then move on. But that's USC. They're a bunch of front runners. I'm over them. Going
I mean,
up the list.
I don't know I don't know their mindset coming in. I agree. Like they definitely should have taken that. And even if you weren't going to make everyone available, you definitely have to make Caleb available. You make your captains available. You come
Of
in and you get
course.
the guys like that. So you have to make somebody available. Like, listen, I know we're hurting right now, and even if it's, hey, give us a few minutes, like I would have been more happy if they said, listen, we're not going to come right out to the press conference. Give us a minute. This one hurts. We need to take some time to group and gather ourselves and then come in and have that conversation. But somebody has to have that conversation on behalf of the team and the organization, even if it's the coach sitting out there and just like, I'm the only one taking questions. I told my players they're not. This clearly lies on me. It's something that I didn't do to get them prepared. So something needed to be done. And yeah, unfortunately, they
We
went away that
a
they didn't
weak
want to go.
look.
So
A weak look.
definitely a weak
Going
look.
go
I agree.
going up the top 25 here. Number 19, my newly adopted Air Force Falcons.
Hey,
Dominated Navy. I watched a little bit of that game. It was a tough watch, admittedly, but man,
definitely.
they look like a top 25 team. Their defense is good. Obviously, they're disciplined. They play hard. They're up to number 19, and I think at this point they're probably favored to be undefeated. After the regular season, I'd love to see them get in New Year's Six bowl. I think that'd be a great story. Number 17, North Carolina, stubbing their toe Drake May. It seems like
Yeah,
North Carolina every year has one of these like inexplicable losses, no matter how talented they are. Like, man, what a disappointing loss.
definitely a disappointing loss when you really had everything in your favor. And they were ranked 10 last week. So we thought this was going to be an easy win over Virginia. But for some reason, Virginia came out down at USC, at UNC, and came up with the victory. And that's inexcusable. Like, there's always that kind of, we know we're going to play tough when you're in the road. And there's always like, what's the makings of an upset? But you don't think that Virginia is going to go down to UNC and beat them on their home turf 31-27, but that's exactly what happened, and they deserve to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just another one of those head scratches from North Carolina, and it seems like every year, they just have one loss that makes you shake your head, and their season's clearly not over because the ACC is down, and they're probably still the second best team to Florida State. But man, that was shocking. LSU beat up on Army, and Brian Kelly ran the score up on our fine United States Army squad, 63-0, showing exactly what kind of class he has. My Irish are at 14. They like you said before, coming off a bye. Utah came up to 13. Then a bunch of teams, Ole Miss and Oregon State, and then into the top 10. And this is where we can get in. The Nittany Lions only fell 3 spots to number 10.
Right.
And I guess I'll take it maybe from the Penn State point of view, and then obviously we'll let you have the floor to talk about your Silver Bullets and the Buckeyes. From the Penn State point of view, you got to be frustrated, right? You bring in the 5-star quarterback. I know they don't have a ton of playmakers on the outside. It felt like a lot to me watching that game. It felt like Penn State was Notre Dame. Sound defense, tight ends, try to run the ball. You've got a competent quarterback, but you just don't have any playmakers outside. You couldn't stretch the field, and you couldn't match Ohio State's ability with Marvin Harrison to just make the plays you needed to make on third downs in the red zone. Like, you never felt like Ohio State's defense was threatened by anything that Penn State was doing. And that's the same script as the Notre Dame Ohio State game in my eyes. So I was watching that game thinking, man, Penn State and Notre Dame, it just seemed like they were trying to attack them, in similar ways with the similar type of athletes, and it just didn't work. And credit to Ohio State. I texted you, their defensive coordinator is fantastic. I like when he
Jim
blitzes.
Knowles had a great plan. He had a great game.
I like how he blitzes. They're really fundamentally sound. You don't see any missed assignments. You don't see any blown coverages. You don't see guys out of position. Like, the Notre Dame Ohio State game, I'm not watching that. I'm not watching that neutrally. So I'm not watching it the same way as I watched this Penn State Ohio State game. But you just came away with it as, wow, Ohio State's a really well-coached team. They do everything right. And they were able to, take advantage of what Penn State couldn't do well. If you're Penn State, man, you had this all in front of you, right? You bring in the 5-star quarterback. Your defense was just as good as Ohio State, in my opinion. That game is there for the taking. And it's a continuous pattern with them where, they'll beat up on everybody else, and then they get to Ohio State and Michigan, and they hit their head on the door, and they can't punch through. So that's got to be incredibly frustrating as a Penn State fan or as a Penn State player or alumni. I can feel their pain. That kind of feels like Notre Dame sometimes. Like, we can get to a certain level and then can't beat Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama. So those are my observations. And now I cede the floor to you to tell us what your Buckeyes did well, and maybe what it leads towards for the rest of the year.
Honestly, I think we were talking and texting back and forth, and I think we even talked about it last week on our episode about what Ohio State needed to do to be victorious in this game. And one of the things we talked about was their offensive line. Like, could they control both sides of the ball? Could their offensive line get a push and move that Penn State defensive line? And then could our defensive line get pressure without always having to blitz, which is what Ohio State had not really had to do as much this year. And it's funny that you mentioned how they look so well coached. They were never out of position. That was a knock on Ohio State's defense last year. Like, they blitzed, they brought pressure, guys were out of position. It looks like sometimes they didn't know what they needed to do. Sometimes they weren't sound in certain gaps. And that's why they ended up losing the game to Michigan. That's why Georgia, they lost that game because they gave up some guys running in the secondary. So just kind of some miscommunication on the back end. And so you could tell coming into this game and coming into the season, Ohio State had a plan of, we're not going to give up the big play. That was the whole thing. And so when I look at why Ohio State was able to win this game, and I'll bring up the stats because it's really important to show, right? I think the thing we need to talk about and point out is this. You had the second and the third rated or ranked scoring defenses in the country going at it in this game. Penn State was number 2, only giving up 8 points a game. Ohio State was 3, giving up 9.7 points a game. So something had to give. Now, when we look at Penn State, while they scored a lot of points, they really didn't give up they didn't really get a lot of chunk plays. And so that played well into what Ohio State wanted to do defensively. Penn State was only 129th in the country as far as plays of over 20 yards or more. They only had 16 coming into this game. And I think they may have had one on Saturday.
It was a tight end.
Ohio State,
it was a
Ohio
tight
State
end.
had it. Yeah, that was their tight end. They got the tight end on a long pass, right? And I think that was like a 30-yard pass. And that was like the first time they had something like that going in a while. So it's not like their offense is going to be this juggernaut coming into it. I think it was more of the fact that they were methodical. What they were they sustained drives. They were able to run the ball. Their quarterback didn't really make too many mistakes. They were able to just be consistent. They were 48% on third down. So when they got the third down, it was always third and manageable. Ohio State was able to get them out of their rhythm, get them into some third and a little bit longer and make it more uncomfortable for them. And then they won the game on third down efficiency. Like Penn State did not convert a third down until like the last minute and a half of the fourth quarter. Like they were 1 of 16 on third down.
Yeah.
That is where they won. Ohio State's defense won the game. They held them to 49 yards rushing. Ohio State. Now Penn State coming into this game only gave up 72.5 yards a game. So Ohio State had 79. We still struggled running the ball at times, but they were able to make plays, getting Marvin and getting the ball early, making big plays. And that was what really was the difference in the game is Ohio State really just got after it. They got after it with their front four, where we had Penn State coming into this game. They were able to get after the quarterback. They averaged 4.5 sacks a game. We held them to 2. Our offensive line held up, only gave up 2 sacks. We got 4. So we were able to really get them out of their offensive rhythm. And it started with keeping them being able from doing what they wanted to do, which is run the ball. They stopped the run, only giving up 49 yards. And so because of that, they really became one-dimensional. When you really can't run the ball like you want to, we know you got to drop back and pass. Now you're asking a young quarterback to come into a hostile environment. You're asking him to make the right read quickly, but the D-line is getting after you. The D-line was winning one-on-one battles. They were getting pressure. JT was there. They were doing some really good things on the defensive side. And then when they needed to blitz, they could. They were able to be selective in their blitzing packages. And so they didn't have to do it too much. So kudos to Coach Knowles and his staff. And those guys were prepared. And, don't forget, we were missing our top corner on defense and Denzel Burke. So, I mean, we had a rookie, I'm about to say rookie, a freshman, a true freshman out there playing, and he held up. Like, for some reason, I don't understand why Penn State didn't say, let's take a chance. Let's take a shot downfield and see if this young guy can hold up. But the rush got after it. They did their thing. And so I'm glad that we ended up winning the game. And I know the score says it was 20-12, but that game was pretty much it wasn't close at all. That game was out of hand. Once we got that last touchdown, we could have had 26 on the board had we made a couple of field goals, but it wasn't a 20-12 victory. And the Silver Bulls definitely did a great thing.
You never felt like Ohio State was really threatened in that game. As a neutral observer, it felt like it was going to take some kind of fluke or just a combination of plays for Penn State, to win that game. Let me ask you, as a defense, and you texted me that it felt like Penn State was a little bit, scared or reluctant to take a shot down the field. Do you sense that as a corner? Like, do you know? I mean, obviously going into the game, hey, these guys are not dynamic playmakers. You know what your game plan is going to be. You know what the scheme is. You know what the purpose is. They threw the ball. They dropped back 42 times to throw the ball. And they had 180 yards, whatever. Like, how much does that affect how you play when you realize A, going in, and then B, during the game, hey, these guys are just not going to try to throw the ball over my head?
Honestly, you don't really know. You have a game plan based off of what they've done in the past to kind of say, this is, I think, how they're going to attack us. So coaches are going to try to put you in the right situation and say, this is what we think they're going to do. We knew they were going to try to run slants. They were going to try to hit their tight end. They were going to try to hit their running backs coming out of the backfield, because that's what they had shown up until that point. Get the ball quickly out and really don't make the quarterback have to do certain reads make him have to hold the ball too long. You want the ball out quickly, and they were able to score points against teams that they had played previously. I think really what was the difference was because we were able to drop back so many guys. Like when you can get pressure with 4 and you're like, okay, our offensive line is not being able to do things. Now the chess match then is okay, if my O-line can't handle the 4-man rush that they're giving us, I've got to get the ball out quick. So knowing that now your linebackers can be more of a factor, your slot guy can be more of a factor, your nickel corner, because now you can hold and get in those passing lanes. You can do a little bit more things. You can kind of come up with different things. You can disguise it better. And so I think that played into Ohio State's hand. And then he just missed some throws there. He had some opportunities early in the game as was going on to get into a rhythm. He missed it out. That was wide open. They did some really good things where Ohio State played off, and they would throw the quick hitch out there, and he would throw it where they were off far enough where they could just kind of make that completion and either get 8 or 9 yards or sometimes even a first down off of that. I thought they could have done that more on first and second down and really see if Ohio State would kind of bring their corners down to see if you play more man. But Ohio State was able to stop the run. And I think that was the biggest thing, because when it's 3rd and 8, you're looking for a slant. You're looking for something based off of the tendencies. And you knew you had safety help. So you could be a little bit more aggressive in how you wanted to play, depending on the scheme and the formation, because of the fact that we had really been really good about not giving up the deep ball. But that wasn't what their strong suit was. They weren't a team that was going to take too many shots going into it because of the way they play, the nature of their offense. They want to run the ball. They want to grind it down your throat. And so I think their offensive philosophy lined up perfectly for what we wanted to do on a defensive philosophy. And now it's a chess move of what can I do offensively to get you off your game defensively. And Ohio State had Marvin Harrison Jr., which they did not have an answer for. Yeah, they did a good job of moving him around.
It felt like Penn State was playing offense like in a shoebox. Everything was condensed. There was a couple plays I saw. I think Ohio State, had a 0 blitz, and everybody was within like 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. And it's like, how do you, at some point, it feels like to me, you've just got to throw the ball down the field, even if it's intercepted, just for the mere threat of it, because I don't know how you play effective offense if you can't run the ball. And then everybody's within 10 yards of the line. I just don't understand. I don't know how you're planning to play effective offense if you're just completely unwilling to ever take a shot. I guess that's just the thing. It felt like Penn State was playing offense in a shoebox all day long. And no matter how efficient you are, asking a college team to go 12, 13, 14 plays, stay on schedule, not have a holding penalty, not have a false start in that environment. That's why you ended up having 6 points until garbage time, right? Like it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I kept thinking to myself, at some point you've got to take a shot here, and they just didn't do it. And it's like, no, I don't know. I'd be frustrated. I'd be really frustrated if I was Penn State. If I wanted Penn State to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely frustrating to watch it. If you're a fan of Penn State, I loved it as a Buckeye.
Sure, of course.
I'm always bleeding scarlet and gray here, but yeah, to your point, like that's the point of where offensive, like, listen, at some point in time, we just got to take a go route, like take a shot. If it gets picked off, it gets picked off. But I think they were really going on this. We think we can slow down their offense. We think we can stop their offense. We don't think that they can score that many points against us. And Ohio State made enough plays and they made enough drives. And the turning point was really the contact that took away the 60-yard fumble return that McCord had. Like that was like the turning point in the game, because it was really close enough where you're kind of like, Penn State's not out of it yet. If they can get a big break, then what is Ohio State going to do? And so that was one of those things where I'm like, okay, if you're McCord, you can't hold on. You can't make that play. You've got to understand, look, where we are, I can't turn this ball over, take the sack, let your defense, the way your defense is playing. So those are things where when you look about the maturation process of a young quarterback, he's got to learn in those situations. I can't do that.
That's the only thing you couldn't do.
We got lucky there.
Yeah, for sure. Because that probably didn't affect the play. That's not why he got sacked and fumbled. But you're right. Like that was the play of the game. And I guess if you're Penn State, relying on your defense to make like a scoop and score that's a tough recipe to win. I was thinking during that game, Ohio State has Marvin Harrison and Penn State didn't have anybody on the field that could match him. In your eyes, where does Marvin Harrison rank in terms of the Ohio State receivers of the last 15, 20 years? They've had so many. And they kind of all blend together. They all kind of blend together for somebody like me who watches them but isn't, a big fan. Is he I mean, is he better than Smith and Jigba? Is he better than Chris Olave? Like, is he the best one you've seen? Like, where does he rank for you?
I think he ranks up there. It's hard to say he's the best that I've ever seen. I mean, I grew up watching Chris Carter, who was arguably one of the best to do it. Played with Joey Galloway, played with Terry Glenn. So that we've had a history of just having some really good wide receivers come out. David Boston. So I could go on and on and on about the guys that have been in that room, but he's definitely really good. I mean, taking nothing away from him, not trying to put him above anybody else or below anybody. His stats when he's done will speak for himself. I mean, there's not too many guys that possess his side, his speed, the ability to cut on a dime, what he's been able to do, the way they move him around. They put him outside. He's an X. He'll play Z. He plays in the slot. Like, he goes all over the place. Like, they will put him in bunch formations. Sometimes he's the third guy. Sometimes he's the second guy. Sometimes he's the point on that. They'll move him out. So having to understand all those routes and the nuances that go along with that, you could tell that he's a special player. I mean, but the body control, the hands that he's been able to do, the quickness, that'll all take care of itself when the combine comes. And then we can kind of judge by his total career. But man, he's fun to watch. And he's just the next receiver in the long line of what Ohio State's been able to build consistently since even I was there. We've always been able to have receivers come out that have been able to go on and contribute at the next level. And it doesn't hurt that your dad is also a Hall of Fame wide receiver.
Right.
So,
and how funny that, you mentioned how he moves all over the field, and famously his dad didn't, right? Like, his dad always stuck to one side of the field. He was always on what was it, Peyton Manning's right-hand side. And like, they just worked that one side of the field. That's kind of ironic. And I guess the other observation I'd have, or, kind of question for you, it's interesting that Ohio State continuously gets these blue chip wide receiver prospects. They're really one of the only Northern schools who consistently gets those guys. Michigan, certainly my Fighting Irish would die for one of these guys, let alone, the pipeline you've had. But even if you think about all the successful Northern schools over the past 20, 25 years, Ohio State is the only one that will have the playmakers on the outside. Why do you think that is?
Honestly, it's just recruiting and the style of offense that they run. They run pro style routes, and then you've got to give it up to quarterback coach. I mean, or a receivers coach. I mean, Hartline he's a guy who's in there. He's selling the program. He's getting guys to buy into what he's done. And he was a pretty good receiver himself and quick and had a good career in the National Football League, and then went to the coaching. So when you have a guy that can talk about, hey, I played here. When you have a guy that says, hey, I played at that next level, I understand what it takes, and then I'm going to teach you that. And then you have the track record to say, listen, here's who I've coached, here's who's been in my room, and this is where they got drafted. It's not hard to kind of sell people on the fact that, look, we're going to spread the ball open. We're going to give you an opportunity to catch balls. We throw the ball this many times. I love the fact that Ohio State says, listen, we're going to be a pass first team. Like, for some reason, we cannot run the ball effectively. So we're going to find ways to just make sure that we put McCord in good situations. And I thought McCord, he's gotten better every week. He got better this week. He made the right decisions, except for the one play that didn't count, that could have potentially cost him in a game. He's gotten better every week. He's had the right reads. Now, I will say he's got to still continue to get better, right? Like, when he misses high, and that's feet. He's got to get his feet under him. He's got to get the feet set, keep the base small. And so as he gets more comfortable doing that, I think he'll get a lot better. But, look, I mean, you're gonna go be on display. So it's not hard to sell it. And Carnell Tate is now the next man in the line that they say they could be better than all the guys that have come before him.
I can't wait.
It just keeps going. Like, and there's another guy that just got the sign up. He's a 5-star receiver that's coming there next year. So that's what happens when you have success. People want to come and do what they've seen other people come in. So it doesn't hurt to have Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett and all those guys that come through, like Chris Olave just recently. Like, it helps. And so when you have that long line and you have Hartline there, like, it can keep a nice little pipeline of guys coming. And at some point in time, it's going to be who can lure Hartline away, right? Like, that's the question of
When's he an OC?
And say, yeah.
Right,
who's
OC or head coach? Right, of course. One more question, one more observation from the game. I saw CJ Stroud was there. It was obviously his bye week, and I found it interesting that he was like on the sideline and almost like part of the coaching staff. It was usually you'll see the players. I don't know if did you notice that? Like, usually the players. was that a little weird? Like, obviously he was with the team last year. So do you think as the starter, if you're Kyle McCord, is that uncomfortable? Is it welcomed? I just thought it was interesting that he was so close to the action, being an alumni player. It just struck me as a little odd.
It goes to the point of he was in the quarterback room with Kyle McCord last year. Like, that was his backup. So when you go and say, okay, CJ had an amazing career at Ohio State, was the number 2 overall pick, and is having a pretty decent, well, I won't say decent, I'll say a pretty good rookie season so far. And then he comes in and he's telling you what he's seen, because you're trying to figure out how you can get the offense humming along like he was able to do last year. So if he can give you any tips of, hey, watch your feet. Hey, when the safety does this, they're in this. Yeah, I'm going to take that as a player. So I didn't think it was odd. It's just because he knows all the players. He knows everybody on that sideline. He knows the coaching staff. So he's going to have a direct pipeline that maybe somebody who graduated 4 years ago, or somebody like myself who may have, if I was at that game, I'm hanging back. Like, I'm not.
Hey, old man, get out of here, old man.
You got gray hair, old dude. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Like, they ran the wishbone when you played.
Right. So all those things where you're just like, all right. So no, I didn't think it was odd. I thought I liked it. You go to see the camaraderie and the love that you have for the guys that are on the field there. So there's a level of respect that goes into it when you put in work with that guy, and CJ and McCord know each other. They've been around each other for a long time.
Yeah. I didn't view it as a negative. I guess I was just surprised at how close he was to the the QB coach interaction, et cetera. And it all makes sense. And frankly, it's a good look. Like, he's probably the best rookie quarterback in the NFL right now. And if you're Ryan Day, I mean, just having him on the sideline and visible doesn't hurt with recruiting and to your point about receivers, like, hey, this is our latest quarterback out of the pipeline. So I could totally understand why he was there. There was just a lot of CJ Stroud. He was like the Taylor Swift of the Kansas City Chargers game. He was just on the screen a lot, and I'm just like, interesting that he was on a lot.
He was on a lot, but that's the way it goes. Like, they're gonna try to make sure they get, like, look at CJ. He's over there giving him tips and doing all these things. But really good game, and I love how my Buckeyes came out and fought through. And they're gonna have another tough test this week. Maybe not the offensive juggernaut with Wisconsin, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well later.
We will. So we're gonna get to that Wisconsin Ohio State game coming up. The rest of the top 10, Alabama started out a little bit slow against Tennessee, but boy, every week you just feel like they're getting it a little more. They're getting it a little more. They're getting it a little more. And you just, now they got to bye, and then they have the showdown against LSU, and that's going to be such an interesting game and so much fun, I think, because that's kind of a stylistic clash. And LSU's up and down the field, and Bama wants to play a certain way, and that's going to determine Alabama's season. They can't lose again.
Right, can't lose again, but they played a really good physical game against Tennessee, and early on, Tennessee was kind of looked like they might take control, but Bama's figured it out. Right, they understand that Milroe is a young quarterback. They're going to take their growing pains with him, so they're going to try to run the ball. They're going to play sound defense. And they're going to put him in the right situations where he doesn't really make a mistake that cost him. And he was able to do that. They were able to get some turnovers and do some things on defense that really stymied Tennessee in the second half. And they were able to pull away with a 34-20 victory. And so it was close. Like, you're looking like, can Tennessee do this? And then stop here. Like, that's hard-nosed Alabama defense. And they were able to really do that. And so they put themselves in the situation of where they were. And we talked about this in a couple episodes about this has been the first year since 2015 that Alabama was out of the top 10. And that year they won a national championship. So you could see them coming. They're like the horse, in the back of the pack. They're getting better every week.
And it's like every week. And it's like, man, if they can get by LSU, they don't play Georgia in the regular season. So they would only meet up with them in the SEC championship game. And God, I got to tell you, I wouldn't want to play them 5 weeks from now. I would have rather played them 5 weeks ago than 5 weeks from now. Like, they're only going to get better. So the next 4 teams, 8, 7, 6, and 5, is kind of interesting. It's Oregon, then Texas, then Oklahoma, then Washington. And what do those 4 teams have in common to me? They all played each other a couple weeks ago in showdown games, and they all kind of had a hangover this week. Oregon, was a little sleepy and then pulled away. Texas was down in the fourth quarter to Houston. Oklahoma was in trouble. I texted you against UCF of all teams, who, looked good and really
They
could have
look
won.
really good.
And then, man, I ended up staying up till about 2:00 in the morning watching Washington, who couldn't get out of their own way on offense, and it needed a 90-yard pick six late on a 4th down against Arizona State, who was like a 28-point underdog, to escape. I mean, they escaped. All four
They
of
did
those teams,
escape.
you could totally see the hangover from the two showdowns the weekend before. And it's kind of amazing how you forget these are college kids. They're 19, they're 20 years old, and you got these big rivalry games. And then the week after, all four of them were sleepy, but they all won. They all pulled it out.
Right. I mean, you look at Oregon, like starting with Oregon and Washington State. Like we knew that Washington State could put up points. Like coming into it, we had talked plenty of times about how the Pac-12 was really, they were scoring points, and it was going to be interesting to see when they got to interconference play of whose defense could step up, right? Because that's always been the knock on the Pac-12 is they can score points, but they don't play defense. So you just get these shootouts. So it's just kind of ironic that, you come into it. And so now you're looking at Washington and State and Oregon, and you're right. Like emotionally, that was a taxing game that the week before, Washington and Oregon. And admittedly, that Oregon made some mistakes that ended up costing them the game. So emotionally, you were like, okay, how do I get myself up? And a game where everybody's like, you should win this game.
Yes.
But Washington State didn't get the memo. They didn't get the memo that, hey, we should just go ahead and fade quietly into the night and let Oregon come back. So I thought that was going to be a hard-fought game for Oregon to start out with, and then I knew they would pull away at the end, which they were able to do. Then you look at going into it, Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas. I'm like, I did not have that game being close. I'm like, Texas should win this game going away, but that's why we love any given Sunday. Like everybody's going to give you their best, and Texas, I think Ewers got hurt in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that kind of took a little bit of steam out of the offense, what they were doing. And it looks like he may miss a couple weeks from that injury. So they're going to have to get their backup ready. But
it really feels like Oklahoma and Texas are just going to play the string out here and then face each other again. Yep. Right. Like it just doesn't seem like this. There's no other, unless there's another big upset. It just doesn't feel like anybody in the Big 12 is going to be able to knock off, because Oklahoma now can afford a loss and still would be in the Big 12 championship game. And it just doesn't feel like anybody's going to beat Texas, because that was about as poorly as Texas is going to play, and they still ended up beating Houston. Oklahoma, man, I don't know. That was weird. Gus Malzahn, the UCF team who got blown out a couple weeks ago, and then they came into Oklahoma and they were toe-to-toe with them. Like I texted you and I'm like, hey,
toe-to-toe.
I'm like, hey, this is like this, sometimes a team will get out early and you're like, oh, well, this is not going to be close. But it got to the point where I'm like, yeah, this might happen. Like it was close in the fourth quarter.
It was really close in the fourth quarter. And I was going back and forth watching, and I'm like, I saw the play where they went and the receivers blowing kisses to the sideline. And you're like, okay, did the ref miss that? But it was just a fun game. I mean, and they had a chip on their shoulder. And if you watch the broadcast, I think they'd had a really bad loss. And sometimes you have to push a reset button, right? And so Gus Malzahn brought his team together and said, listen, I know this season is not what we thought it was going to be, but let's talk some things through. Like, here's what we're going to do going forward. Here's how we get better. Here's how we go out and win games. Here's how we beat the guys that we're supposed to beat. And here's how we go and get an upset against a team like Oklahoma, right? And so you go in there and you're like, we got to go toe-to-toe. And they went toe-to-toe. They went at them. They didn't back down. It's just when you think about the roster setup, Oklahoma had a little bit more talent in the right places, and they called and made some good plays because UCF props, some of the players weren't used to being in a stage in a game that big. But that's what it came down to. But it was fun to watch. If you missed the game, you missed a doozy. That game, they were going back and forth. And I was like turning the game. Like, I'm a good luck charm for UCF, but it was
while
I'm watching the Buckeyes. And so then anytime they would make a play, I would turn back, like, let me get back on UCF. Maybe I'm a good luck charm. And then I walked away to go do something. And then I came back to see that they ended up losing the game. Like, man, I should have stayed there and watched the rest of it, because maybe there would have been another upset.
That's funny. And you mentioning teams that might need to hit a reset button and are losing games that you shouldn't lose. That feels a little too close to home for where you and I are both located with the pro NFL team there, buddy. And then the number 5 team, Washington. Boy, that was, in some ways you could say, okay, you could see it coming, let down, your biggest rival. But I guess when you have the Heisman Trophy favorite and you're playing a team that, you're supposed to beat and you're supposed to dominate. Michael Penix looked confused. He looked lost. Like, it's odd to me. Like, Caleb Williams going into Notre Dame and them just getting kind of beat up. That's one thing, like you get kind of physically dominated. Arizona State, I don't quite understand what happened to Michael Penix in that game. Like, he was just making some inexplicable decisions that made you think, like, is he just unprepared? Was he? I don't know. That just struck me as such an odd game, because it's not like you just got dominated, and it was just, I don't know. I couldn't understand what that kind of came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those games where you thought that he would just come in and light them up. And I think in every season, there's always a game where you're like, he wish he had that back. To when Kate, we talk about that Notre Dame and USC game, and we're talking about how Caleb Williams, what is he going to do? Right. That's a game he wanted back. There's always a game where you've got to figure out where you just don't play well as a team and as a player. And it's, can you still make enough plays to overcome your bad performance or your team's bad performance? Luckily, they escaped with the victory. So for them, it keeps moving on. And Michael Penix is still a really good quarterback. But you're right. Like, it was just one of those things where he made uncharacteristic reads. He made bad throws. But then you also have to give credit to Arizona State. Like, they were able to confuse him. They were able to do some things defensively that maybe they weren't expecting them to do. And so it takes you a little while to kind of figure out how they're doing it. Maybe they understood some of the cadence. Maybe they might have understood some of the, and kind of figured out some of their hand signals, not to be confused with that team up north that's in trouble for stealing signals. I had to go ahead and take that jab. Sorry. But yes. So it's kind of always one of those things, like, you never know why. I think they'll go back and look at the film and say, this is what we needed to do to win the game. We got lucky there, but we got to clean some things up.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, that's all you got to do. It's survive and go to the next week, because that's it. You just got to win. It doesn't matter if it's 40 points, if it's an 8-point victory, a 15-7 victory, a 12-11 victory. If it says W, you go on and you still control your destiny, and that's all you want.
That's right. So it seemed more mental than physical with him, which was kind of surprising. So that was an interesting time in the game. There's about 4 minutes left. Arizona State is up 7-6. And they've got a 4th and 2 at Washington's 8-9 yard line. And there was a case to be made to kick the field goal there, because you had them, really contained them the whole game. On the other hand, you could see Arizona State's 1-5. You have nothing to lose. You feel like if you kick that field goal there, you know how this movie ends. He just goes down the field, wins the game. I applauded the coach's decision to go for it. I enjoy I don't know the Arizona State's coach by name. I should. He's kind of hyper on the sideline. He's kind of all over the place. He rips his head. He kind of reminds me of like Dana Holgerson. Like, his headset comes off and he's yelling at everybody the whole game. He just gives off this vibe of some chaos, on their sideline.
Right.
And I gave him credit for going for it, but boy, as soon as the quarterback let that ball go late and outside, I'm like, oh no. And sure enough, pick 6, and that was it. Like, man, I'm rooting for Washington. I was glad they escaped, because they're fun and interesting. Right. But, oof, that was an escape. Number 4, Florida State. Again, kind of workmanlike. They won.
Right.
I'm a little underwhelmed. Like, they had the big win early in the season. They haven't really played anybody since. And frankly, the ACC is so down, with Clemson being, downright bad, that you don't know whether they're going to. They're probably the biggest lock to make the playoff at this point, I feel like, because I don't see who challenges them.
Well, we'll see.
Sure.
I mean, but as of now, I don't think you're right. There's nobody that's going to challenge them. They already knocked off Duke. So that's going to be kind of like, that was their biggest test early in the season. So they're going to run the table, and then we'll see what happens.
Maybe North Carolina in the championship game, and Drake May will, obviously give them a game, but you feel like they probably have the easiest path. Speaking of easy paths, the number 2 team, I'm gonna say something, and then I'll let you have the floor here. They literally have played no one. Like, I went back and looked at their schedule again. Marlon, they've played no one. Their out-of-conference schedule was a joke. Yeah. Most of these, Ohio State stepped up, played Notre Dame. Most of these big premier programs will play someone either at neutral site or, they'll do a home and home. Michigan was like Bowling Green and UMass. They did not have one marquee out-of-conference game. And then, like it or not, the Big Ten, after Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, is just not strong. And they have not yet been challenged. Like, I'm not yet convinced that they're good. They probably are good. But the last time that they were challenged, they lost to TCU. So I don't know. Like until they play Penn State, I feel like, what do we know about them? What's your take?
I would agree with that assessment. I think their non-conference schedule is something to be desired. But at the end of the day, as the saying goes, you can only play who's on your schedule. So they've done that. Like, yes, their schedule is something you're like, you know what? I'm going to question that. I think where you'll see this play out the most is when the first college football playoff rankings come out. I think you can make a case for Michigan to be 3, maybe even 4 off of that, just off the fact of their strength of schedule.
I think you can make a case for them to be 5th. Like how do you rank Washington below Michigan? Washington
you could put Washington. Yeah, Washington beat Oregon. They've got a top 10 victory in their belt. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I believe it comes out this week or next week. One of those is coming up soon. So I think when you look at those things, yeah, I mean, you're right. That out of conference schedule is a joke right now. But you knew they knew that going in. So they had to take care of business going in, which they've done. You knew you were going to have Penn State. You knew you were going to get Ohio State on the schedule. You were hoping that maybe somebody else in the Big Ten would be good on your schedule and they would get in that top 15 ranking. So you can say, hey,
there's no one else good.
There's no one else in the Big Ten. So I think that's what's going to be the downfall to them. Now, based off of how they play, I mean, when you look at what they are, they score a lot of points. Now, they haven't played anybody. And so they're kind of like in the same boat as Penn State was, is they haven't faced a top 10 defense. And they've scored and scored a lot of points on the people that they played against. They scored over 40 points a game. They do a lot of things well. They're 70% on 4th down, 56% on 3rd down. Like, they're consistent. They move the ball. They rush the ball well. They average 174, almost 175 yards a game. They throw for about 250 yards a game. So the offense is humming. They do some really good things, but again, they haven't been tested. And so that's what's going to be the mark of what we need to look for when we think about when they face somebody. So their first test will be when they play Penn State. And Penn State's defense is going to be able to, can they stop the run? Because that's what they want to do. They want to be able to stop the run. And they want to be able to run the ball with quorum. And then they want to be able to set up the pass and the play action pass with JJ. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm just going to wait and see. I mean, I'm not going to throw and pour too much salt on the wound. They've got something going on right now with somebody saying they've been stealing signals and using things on the sideline to do some things illegally. So I'll just wait. I'm like that Michael Jackson in the Thriller video, just eating my popcorn, ready to go around, just sitting like this, like, I'm just going to wait and see what happens, because I can't wait to see them vacate wins if that happens, because that's what's going to happen.
That's funny. Do you feel like, as a former player, if you were Ohio State, you've now had 2 top 10 battles. What does that give you an advantage going forward that Michigan doesn't have? The fact that they've gone 8 games now and not been tested yet. Like when the game is close against Penn State or when the game is close against Ohio State, what advantage will those 2 teams have, over a Michigan who hasn't played anybody and not even hasn't played anybody, but they haven't had a close game yet?
I think, well, what'll happen is mentally and the psyche as a player, you've been there before. You understand the execution that's needed, right? Like you're not so stressed about the pressure. You know the magnitude that's there, but because you've already done it against Notre Dame on a 4th down and 4th down and forever, and you convert those a couple of times to pick up and continue it, and then you've got 1 play left to execute and get a 1 yard, even though Notre Dame only had 10 players on the field, you still get that and you win that game. And then you come back and you play a Penn State defense that only had given up 8 yards per game, or 8 points a game. So when you think about those things, like, you're like, we're battle tested. We don't know how that Michigan team, and I'll say it now just because I'm on the podcast, but I would normally say that Michigan team up north or that team up north. But when you have a team like that, now you're looking like, all right, we don't know how they're going to respond when the pressure's on them. Like, because all the pressure is going to be on them. And so Ohio State understands how to execute. I think the thing going into it that you feel better about as a Buckeye fan is I feel better about our defense. What always happened and what scared me the most was going into those games was, you knew if it became a shootout, like, all right, our offense could do it, but you didn't necessarily want that. And so we knew that Michigan could run the ball. We had come into those 2 games the last 2 years, really had given up some big plays, some big runs, some big passes. And so I like our chances going into it now because of the way our defense plays, how we haven't given up the big run or the big pass. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to execute and do some things and get some of those runs in a game, but I like our chances of being more sound and being able to really corral and tackle and fly to the ball. So it's going to be fun to watch, and I'm not going to give any predictions because there's a lot of football left to play.
Yeah, sure.
But
Let me just read you this this murderer's row of a schedule they've had so far. They had East Carolina at home, UNLV at home, Bowling Green at home, Rutgers at home. Then they played at Nebraska. They played at Minnesota. They played Indiana at home, and now Michigan State. I mean, those are terrible football teams. Like, I'm sorry, like there has not been. I mean, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, Rutgers have been your 5 Big Ten teams. Oh my goodness, that's awful. So, and then now they play Purdue, which is going to be at home, which is another win, and then finally they'll finally be challenged at Penn State. Then they go to Maryland, which, boy, I tell you what, just looking ahead at those last 3 games, that's tricky because that's right in between. At Penn State, Ohio State at home. Watch out. If they beat Penn State, watch out for that Maryland game. I'm going to call it early. That's the ultimate trap game.
That's a trap game. That's a trap game.
And Tua's little brother can sling the ball. Like, they're at least a live dog. Whereas, Michigan State and Minnesota and Nebraska. I mean, I don't know. You and I probably could have suited up for Michigan and probably still pulled that game out, Marlon. Like, that's an 8-game, really easy runway into the season. Number 1 team, obviously, is Georgia. Really not much to say. They just keep kind of chugging along, and obviously things are going to get a little bit tougher for them. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about complementary football and, the idea of it. I know, for people listening who aren't in, the Western New York region, it's kind of a big topic here with our Bills, and they're struggling. And I guess what I wanted to ask you, not Bills specific, but I was watching the Iowa. Unfortunately, I watched the end of the Iowa-Minnesota game. I feel like Iowa got robbed on that absolutely terrible call about the fair catch. But, they always talk about like complementary football and how if you only have, so many playmakers or you have a great defense that, the offense has to, play complementary football. Do you agree with that philosophy? And as a player, like I'm sure you were on teams both in the NFL and in college where one side of the ball was clearly the side that you leaned on to try to win games. Like, how is that in the locker room? Like, is there a dynamic where, hey, if the defense is that much better than the offense, or if the offense was that much better than the defense, like how does that play in a locker room if it's basically being said, hey, we need to, tone down the offense to help the defense, or we need to lean on the defense and, offense, just don't turn the ball over. Like, don't give the game away. Iowa, it feels like anytime they kick the ball at the end of a possession, they're happy. Whether it's a field goal or a punt, they're just trying to kick the ball like every possession. It drives me nuts. What do you have to say?
Well, I mean, I think there's no animosity in a locker room among players. You just kind of go and you play your assignment. So you understand going into what the game plan is going to be. You want to make sure you execute it. I think Buckeye fans, we've seen this blueprint before. This is Tressel ball. Like, that's what Jim Tressel did early in his career when he didn't necessarily have all the playmakers on one side of the ball. So you just play really good defense. You don't really try to give up the big play. You score what you can score, and you go in, and if it's a 13-9 game, so be it. It's a 13-9 game. Again, at the end of the day, as long as you're winning, it doesn't matter. And so I understand why Iowa does what they do. They don't have those dynamic playmakers on the outside. Like, they don't have the 5-star players that are coming there or the blue chip athletes that are coming and wanting to be like, let me come to Iowa. So you can only play the best way you can play. And so when you look at it, hey, what do we do well? We're going to play really good defense. They're going to be able to do some things. They're going to have strong linebackers. So we've got to be able to stop the run, and we've got to be able to not give up deep balls in the passing game. And so you can win some games. And so that's what Iowa had been able to do so far in the season. And so I don't get mad about it. It's not pretty, it's not fun to watch, but a defensive minded coach doesn't mind. He doesn't care about that because, one, complementary football means if you're facing a team that's really explosive on the other side, on the offense side of the ball, then you're taking possessions away from them. And so that's why you want to kind of have a long drive, because you have a 15-play drive. Then that means that offense that might score 45 points a game, that's minutes that they don't have to kind of get their offense rolling. So so as a defensive minded coach, you don't mind that. And so when I look at our local team, our local pro team here, people get mad when they hear about complementary football, but it takes all 3 facets, right? So you want to be able to punt the ball and pin them in and do all those things.
Can I argue with you for a minute here? All right. Now we're going to get into one of our first arguments on our show here.
Let's argue. Let's do it.
All right. So here's my thing. In college, or in the pros, if you're the Chicago Bears, if you're the Iowa Hawkeyes, if you're Notre Dame and you're playing Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama, I fully agree. You have to lean into your strengths and you need to slow the game down. When we had Jeff Burris on, the grass is a little higher that week. When Notre Dame beat Florida State with Charlie Ward back in the day, it was, Jerome Bettis, right? That's complimentary football. I don't ever hear Andy Reid talking about playing complimentary football with Patrick Mahomes, or if you have a superstar, if you've got Josh Allen, I guess to me, the complimentary football is just go out and score points. And then your defense can play from ahead. Everybody always talks about playing from behind. Play from ahead. Lean into what you have. If you're Iowa, of course it's your defense. And sure, if you can kick the ball away and not give away points, of course. And I made that point on Twitter last night. It just feels like some coaches are kind of stuck in their ways and maybe not adjusting to the personnel they have. And it's just kind of an overall philosophy of football where it's got to be complimentary or whatever else. But man, if three of your best defenders are banged up and you've got an all-world quarterback, I don't know. It just seems like to me, just go score the ball.
Yeah, I mean we didn't have an argument. Here's what I would say: like you use Patrick Mahomes for example, right? So when you think about that, they do play complimentary football. They just don't call it complimentary football because of the way you have a superstar, and we talk about Taylor Swift a lot. So when you really think about that, when their offense isn't humming, which there were games when their offense just wasn't clicking and they weren't moving, their defense bailed them out. Their defense stopped and they made possession. They got the ball back for them. That's complimentary football. We just don't talk about it. They go and kick a field goal. Their defense goes and gets a stop and they get the ball back. So all it is it just depends on, you have at some point in time, their offense will try to score points. But if your offense doesn't score points, then the defense can't give up. But the defense can't give up more points than your offense scored. That's a complimentary football. It just depends on how you want to call it, what you want to label it, how you want to be it. Like it all works in unison right there. So when you use them, like, okay, we're going to get the ball back to a dynamic offense. If they don't score points or if they throw an interception, what does the defense do? We've got to get a stop. We can't let them get points. And if they get points and it's deep in our territory, we can only give up 3 points. That's it. We're going to give up a field goal and that's it. And our offense is going to come back and score a touchdown. And so it's just one of those things. We just here locally, I know everybody's up in arms because they're like, we need to use this, we need to do that. But on a collegiate level, it's the same concept. It's just that's what Alabama's doing. Alabama is playing complimentary football. Like, so it's just using what you have, understanding who you are as and your identity on offense and defense, and saying we're going to play to our strengths and we're not going to beat ourselves by trying to be something that we're not. That's complimentary football. And
sure, I guess I call it
because
I call it winning football. I guess I call that winning football, and
that's complimentary football.
Well, I guess I just view it as you're right, and you're factually correct, and that's all well and good. But when you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and you're keeping your horse in the barn, when that's your best way to win, because you have this overall philosophy of trying to be balanced, and I guess I just that's where I view it as being a little counterproductive, that you're almost trying to be balanced, irregardless of whether you're.
This is the debate that should happen on If the Walls Could Talk. We should have.
There you go. Well, yeah. But my our buddy Don is loath to talk about the current team and all. But yeah, and it's not just the Bills. It's
right.
Just, in general. Like I guess I'm gonna always try to lean into whatever my strength is, and I guess I want the other side of the ball to kind of come along. Just come along. Like I don't want to cater to my weakness. Like I don't want to use my offense to try to cover for my defense. I want my offense to score 50 points, so it doesn't matter what the hell the defense does.
Yeah, but sometimes if your defense is not scoring enough, or they're not stopping, then it makes no sense, because then you're like, I'm scoring 50 and they score 52. Well, that's not a winning recipe. So sometimes you just want to slow the game down, and you want to make sure if you're going to score 50 points, then slow it down and score 48 and keep them to 35, because your defense is going to get a blow, and they'll be able to. That just takes more possessions away, and so that's kind of how that complimentary or that winning football mentality works. But it's just one of those things where I know people aren't happy because everybody has this thought here about how the offense should look, but we keep comparing teams from last year. Well, last year they did this. Sure. This is 2023. It's not the same as 2022. And I think sometimes, just like we tell players to have a short memory, fans need to have a short memory and kind of not compare the team that they have. Like, what's the difference? It's the same players. It's the same guys they have. Okay, things are different. Sometimes the O-line, just the scheme is just different, or sometimes people play you differently. New England, if we're going to talk about that game real quickly, the one thing that I noticed that hadn't really happened too much throughout the entire season is they were able to get pressure. Josh got a lot of pressure that entire game. So do I go for the sake of my offense can be dynamic to put the quarterback at risk? Probably not. Like, so what do you do to take advantage of a rush? You run the ball. If you can run the ball, then you make them become hesitant, which then allows you to be able to do some things that you want to do complementary to your defense that was also undermanned.
There's that word again.
Yeah,
there's that word again.
Throw that complimentary back at
I hear you, man. No, and I'm not saying you're wrong.
Sorry, man. Everybody listening, sorry we had to go ahead and deviate because it's a tough Monday. It's a lost Monday for us. It's not a victory Monday. And so
that's right.
We're all kind of taking it because it's like us. When I felt when Ohio State lost to that team up north last year for the second year in a row, you woke up like, ugh, that left a sour taste in my mouth. And we lost to the Patriots if you don't follow the Bills football.
Sure, of course. So, looking ahead to this Saturday, a couple of really, really good games. I guess the only other thing I wanted to ask you from the Penn State-Ohio State game, if you're a Penn State defender, were you ever frustrated at the other side of the ball? It's just they can't, like you're a Penn State defender, you're playing your ass off, you're holding Ohio State down, and the other side of the ball just can't punch through. Like, did you ever get frustrated?
Personally, I never got frustrated in the game. I tried to make sure I stayed even keel and just like, look, y'all do your thing. I trust that y'all going to score. But I could see them kind of saying, come on, more than encouraging me. Like, come on, guys, we got this. Like, we're going to get you the ball back. You got this. Go ahead and punch it through. Go ahead and punch it in. Go get that touchdown. We don't need the field goals. Go get the touchdowns. And for whatever reason, Ohio State was always able to be just that one step ahead. And then when they had throws, the quarterback just didn't make them. Like that, he just missed some throws, and he'll get better. I think they have a really good quarterback. I've watched him play a little bit this season, and he does have a big arm. So I think at some point in time, they will turn him loose and take some shots down the field because you have to make defenses play honest. You have to threaten to be able to take the lid off of it to see what they're going to do and how they're going to respond, because it may open up some of those run lanes for you, but they never did that. So I think they would probably wish they took some shots now. In hindsight, it's 2020, but yeah, I mean, as a player, usually you're going to stick together. You're not going to try to be divisive on the sideline and be like, listen, y'all got to do it. Like we doing everything we can over here. You guys suck. Like that's not.
Man, you can see why people who are listening to this can probably see why Marlon made the NFL and was such a great player. And I'm not just blowing smoke. Like your emotional regulation and your ability to keep emotion to keep even keeled has to be one of the biggest strengths you had. And it's really imperative as a player or as a coach or a coach's assistant, like I was. Like you got to keep emotion out of it the best you can, because man, like you got to line up and play, the next series, the next week. Like that emotional regulation that I was able to view from guys in the NFL was really incredible. And it gave me perspective going forward, where I'm sometimes the only guy not yelling in my house or in my group of fans. And, the season's not over, all the rest. Now, when it comes to Notre Dame and that second loss, when you feel like that is the end of the season, well, some of those lessons from my days in the NFL did not translate, and I got kind of frustrated. Going forward, week 9 here, a couple really good games. We got that Oregon at Utah game. What tough spot for Utah here, right? Like bounce back after beating USC. As much as you love Utah and how physical they are and how disciplined they are, this is a tough spot, right?
Yes, it is. Tough game, but Utah plays tough-nosed football, so it's going to be fun to see what they can do and if they can slow down that Oregon offense. Like that's it right there. Like that's what you want. If you're Utah, you got the loss early, and then you're like, well, we still control our destiny. All we got to do is go win out, and we control what we can do. And so you can't ask for it. I mean, 8-14 matchup. Like they came off of a great win last week, and now you got another offense that's going to come out and spread you around and do some things. Can you get after it? Can you score enough points? Time will tell, but I like Utah's chances in this game. I really do. I'm going to go ahead and say that now. I like Utah's chances. It's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and it's too bad that the Pac-12 is splitting up next year, because this Utah USC rivalry has gotten to be really fun, and I've really enjoyed that Utah's beaten the hell out of them 3 times in a row now. And unfortunately, it's going to end, and Utah's going to go to the Big 12, where I think they're going to really they're going to probably be the premier program in the Big 12 going forward, right? Like they've
Absolutely.
got the coach and the infrastructure, and without Oklahoma and Texas there, like I think they're going to have not an easy path, obviously, to the college football playoff, but they're going to be the marquee program in the new Big 12.
They're going to be the marquee program and favored to win out of that. Absolutely.
And I'm going to be sad to no longer cheer for them to just kick USC's ass every week. At 3:30 as well is one of my favorite games as a kid. I always remember they used to call it the world's largest cocktail party. I don't think they can call it that anymore for whatever reasons. But Georgia, Florida in Jacksonville, another one of those neutral site games, another game that I kind of always wanted to go to as a kid. The stadium split, 50-50, like the Oklahoma-Texas game. You give Florida any shot?
I think they have a chance, and I think they have a chance because Georgia has started slow in games, and their tight end Bowers is going to be out this game. So I don't know what Georgia's going to look like and how focused they're going to be early into the game. So I think if Florida can get some turnovers and their offense can really score some points and get up early, then it's a matter of can they hold on? Can their defense get enough spots or get enough stops? And they don't have their blanket, their guy that they're going to go to say, okay, when we need something, we're going to our All-American tight end. He's going to be out of this game. So they've got a shot. Now, realistically, should Georgia win this game? Absolutely. Like this should be going hands down. Georgia should run away with this game. But again, time will tell. And on any given Saturday, this is why you love it. And I will say because it's neutral. Now if this was in Georgia, hands down, I would say if it's a close game, they're going to get the benefit of the refs, the calls that's going to come in there late. They're going to get all the things. They're going to have the crowd. It's going to be split. It's going to be pretty neutral being in Jacksonville and probably a little bit more pro Florida than Georgia. So I think that may play well if it's a tight game because you're not going to have as many Georgia fans cheering as you would if you're at home.
Right. A couple more. So every year Notre Dame plays Navy, and that is my least favorite game of the year. My late father absolutely hated playing Navy. The other game that they seem to play every other year is they play Pitt. And every time Notre Dame plays Pitt, it's like going to the dentist. Like it's just Pat Narduzzi, his defense. You hear about Pat Narduzzi's defense 20 times in the game. Pitt plays just a really, basic defense that gives Notre Dame fits over the years. They're disciplined. They just, they try to shorten possessions, complementary football, and every time Notre Dame's had a great year, the Pitt game has been an escape for them. The 2012 season where they went to the national championship, it ended up going to 3 overtimes, and Pitt's kicker missed a gimme field goal in overtime. Notre Dame would have lost. Like the 2020 season, we barely escaped Pitt. I hate when Notre Dame plays Pitt. I hate watching the game. I have no ill will towards Pitt. The Pitt Panthers, but
I mean, it sounds like it. It just sounds like you don't like Pitt.
No, fair enough. Saying. I guess it's 25 years of having to watch it and suffer through it. So it's in Notre Dame, and I'll be shocked if Notre Dame loses, but I'll also be shocked if they blow them out. Probably one of those 1 possession, 2 possession games in the fourth quarter, and Notre Dame's got Clemson coming up on the road next week. Hopefully they don't look ahead. I want to see them finish strong. So, that's another one to look forward to. My Air Force Falcons play again against Colorado State at 7:00. I want to see them stay undefeated. And then you talk to us about Ohio State, Wisconsin. Did you play at Camp Randall?
I did play at Camp Randall.
Did they do jump around back then?
Did they? I don't know. Maybe. I never really paid attention to what they were doing. I just wanted to make sure I was focused on what we're doing. They may have, or it might have started around that time. I think when we played there, that was the clip that I forgot to get for this game of when I blocked the field goal. So I think for us, it was one of those crazy games because we were on an amazing streak. It was my junior year. We were up in Camp Randall, and it's about 34 degrees. It's a 3:30 kickoff, light snowflakes, overcast day. And you're just kind of like, all right, what is this game going to look like? And we just went after. They had a really good rushing attack. You had Brent Moss going up in there. And so he was kind of the guy that they had always handed the ball to. They were really good about running the ball. And we had this high-powered 2-quarterback system with Bobby Hoyne and Brett Powers offense. And we were in there, and we found ourselves down 14-7. And we had to go 99 yards to get a game-winning tie. We go 99 yards in 4 plays, and we tied the game up. And all of a sudden we think we're going to win this game. Our like momentum has swung, and we get them to the first third down and they pick it up. And then we get them into another third down and they pick it up. And we do this going down the field. Like every time you thought about it, like light snow, and then it's starting to get their fans are champing up, overrated. They're calling us names. And I forgot to mention about how we came into the locker room going out, and this is when you're allowed to throw stuff at players. So they took marshmallows and they put pennies and nickels and quarters and dimes and all this change in them. And we were walking on, they're just pelting us with these coin-loaded marshmallows and just throwing things at us. So we're like, put your helmets on when you go out, or else you're going to get hit in the face with something pretty hard. So that was kind of how it was back then. And we get there, and third down after third down after third down, they keep converting. Every time we thought we'd get a stop, they got the stop. And it came down to, and I want to say his name is Rich Snetsky. He was a left-footed kicker, and they would actually shift their line. So they would actually, because he was a left-footed kicker, most teams would rush from the side of the opposite side. So we like to rush from our own left. And so they just put an extra guy out there. So they had more guys on the right side to make it a longer kick. So it would be hard for you to kind of go get. And I had practiced that all week. I had already blocked a field goal before in that season. And I just stepped like they did this thing where they stepped down because they didn't think anybody was fast enough to get over the edge. And he stepped down and I stepped over his foot and laid out. And all you heard was the thud, the double thud. That's all you want to hear on field goal. You want to hear a thud, like the kick, and then another thud, which meant you blocked it. And I jumped up, and we ended up getting a 14-14 tie because, yes, I'm old enough to say we had ties back then.
God, what a anticlimactic. I mean, clearly for you made the play of the game to save your team. But, boy, what's it like to go through a game like that and then just end in a tie?
We had ties before, so we had already seen that happen. So it wasn't like it was unknown and it was a foreign concept to me. I think because of that, that's why you now have the overtime rules that they're now, because people are like, we can't have ties. Those games are too good. We need a clear victory or a clear victor to come out of this. And so they changed the rules. I want to say a year or two after that, they changed the rules, because how do you go and say, I've got a team that's 11-1 or a team that's 11-0-1 playing, and you give the guy that's 11-0-1 the national championship because they tied. So they made the right decision by changing the rules. But back then you could have a tie, and we got stuck with the tie, and we ended up being 10-1 that season.
We're going to put that up on Twitter, and your reaction is rightfully very enthusiastic. And like I mentioned on the program last week, your teammates were either shell-shocked or I don't know. It was weird. Like,
they were shell-shocked because people didn't know. People thought like, where'd the ball go? They thought it was good. And so they see me coming around the corner, jumping up. They're like, where's the ball? And nobody knows what happened, because normally when you see a block, you see the ball it goes backwards. But because of the way he was kicking it and it was so far, I had to dive at an angle. And dive up. So when my angle was kind of like this, like my hands were like this. I dove up, and I'm trying to show it so you can see it, but my hands were up to go get it. And so the ball, I didn't get a clear two hands on it to knock it back. I was only able to get it, so it went to the side and hit the ground because of the way
it looked like you were the only one. Now that you say that, it looks like you're the only one on the field that knows. Obviously,
I knew it was blocked because it hit my hand. Like when I came up, I'm getting this, and I knew I was going to get it because I had rushed an extra point earlier in the game, and I didn't lay out. I just came across, and I was like, I wonder if I can get here. And I took off. I had kind of measured, like, I've got to step over his foot, get here, like kind of come out of that burst, like go. And he kicked an extra point, and I just swatted at the ball, and I hit it. I just kind of got a finger on it. I'm like, oh, I can block an extra point or a field goal on this if I actually lay out on this. So I kind of had the angle of how he was kicking. I kind of had thought all this thing in my head of like, if I go after, I've got to get here. And I've got to get to this point because this ball goes at this trajectory. Not saying that I was analytical or I was
no, it was
like had superpowers, but just kind of playing in the game. You kind of think like, if I have to lay out, this is the angle of, this is the point where I have to get. This is where he's going to get it. Watching his balls take this angle if he hits it right. So all those things had to line up, and I got as close to the edge as I could get without being off sides. Like that was one of those things that I talked about when we went into the pregame and we would come out. And I know we're getting a little long in this episode, but this is where you practice the snap and jumping the snap. So when they were practicing in their warm-ups in the pregame, I was practicing his snap and how he did it and his head movements. If he went up, if he went down before he did those things, if you could see his arms, if there was a little hitch, I had all that down. So when he went, I was like, okay, I'm going. Like, this is how it's going to be. And and we went, and when he snapped the ball, I got a great jump off of it and was able to get that block.
Is that your favorite play of your career or your college career?
One of them, I think, I ended up blocking the field goal against Michigan my senior year, and our first victory against Michigan, Coach Cooper's first victory. That's one of my favorite. I also had a 100-yard interception return against Purdue. That's probably one of my favorites, just because it was just so much fun to get that pick. And you live and that's Ohio State folklore, because there's not too many people that have 100-yard interceptions in the record book. So that was always kind of cool. But that will always stick out as one of my favorite plays, just because of the magnitude of the game. Like, we were number 3 in the country. And heard a lot of overrated. And we had a chance to come back and still win the Big Ten championship that week. The following week, if we beat our nemesis, our arch nemesis, up in Ann Arbor, and we didn't win, but at least we gave ourselves a chance to do that.
That's a tough back to back. You went at Wisconsin, then at Michigan.
Yeah, wow, that's how we finished it out.
Is Camp Randall one of the more difficult places you've played in college?
I love playing there. It's just the way their fans scream and how they do it. It's so much fun, and they were more physical. They like to really try to pound the ball in and really get after you. So I love playing against Wisconsin. That was like one of my favorite games to play, just because they were going to be so physical. Like, they love to run the ball, and I like to tackle as a corner. I was one of those corners that like to tackle. So it was fun to me to really say, okay, let's do this. Illinois was a team that always gave us fits too, because they were very physical with us, and they had a really good defense. Simeon Rice, Greg Hardy, John Holacek. So when I think about guys that we played against back in the day, like, those are teams that we were playing against in the Big Ten, and Illinois always had big tight ends, like 6'5", 285, 275 tight ends. So you had to be able to tackle as a corner when I was coming out. So I always had the big shoulder pads to make sure we could tackle.
Well, that's a great story. Like I said, I'm going to put that video up on Twitter for anybody that's still with us here. So we're gonna leave it there. This was a really fun episode. Hopefully everybody likes it and subscribes to our YouTube channel, Cover One Network, and then Cover One College Football Network as well. I know we had talked about doing kind of a live watch along for the Ohio State-Wisconsin game. Unfortunately, the playback app is not yet allowing. They changed the rules. They're not allowing college football yet. If they do, I certainly would want to do a watch along with you before the end of the season. Pick some Ohio State game to do that. But hopefully everybody likes and subscribes and enjoyed the episode. Any final thoughts? Ohio State win Saturday?
I hope they win. They go up to Camp Randall, and they're going against former Buckeye Luke Fickell. So I'm sure he's licking his chops to try to get and start 1-0 in his tenure as a Wisconsin head coach against the Buckeyes. But it's going to be a tough sledding for them. They like to run the ball. Ohio State doesn't give up big plays. So it's going to see, can they slow down this Ohio State offense? Can they take Marvin Harrison Jr. out of it? Then who steps up? Who's the next receiver that steps up to make plays? I do like Cade Stover in this. I think he has a monster game against Wisconsin, because I think they're going to try to really stop Marvin Harrison Jr. So should be fun. Right. But I think my Buckeyes win.
All right. We'll see you next week, Marlon.
See you next week.